Elon Musk fulfilled her last wish, and it will break your heart. It was a quiet morning at the airport, and the hustle and bustle of travelers filled the air. Elon Musk, wearing his usual sharp suit, was walking towards the jet, his mind racing with the countless tasks ahead. He had just wrapped up a major business deal, but today, something felt different. There was an energy in the air that he couldn't quite place, a shift he couldn't ignore. Little did he know, this flight would be unlike any other. As Elon approached the gates, a figure stepped in front of him, blocking his way. A security guard, no more than 5 feet 8 inches, but with a stern expression that suggested he was used to authority. "Sorry, sir, you can't go through here," the guard said, his voice rigid. Elon, taken aback, glanced at the guard. The man wasn't even looking at him, his eyes fixed on the ground, as if he were doing everything he could to avoid confrontation. But Elon knew that look. It was the look of someone who had made a decision before even hearing the full story. Something was off, and Elon felt it in his gut. "Is there a problem?" Elon asked, his voice calm but piercing. The guard finally looked up, his eyes narrowing. "You're not authorized to board this plane. I was told to stop you." Elon's brow furrowed. "By who?" he asked, already starting to feel a flicker of frustration. The guard didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It's just a protocol, sir. You don't understand. I'm just following orders." There was a slight quiver in his voice, as though the words he was saying didn't align with his true thoughts. Elon studied the man, sensing something deeper than just a security issue. His instincts told him this wasn't about policy. It was something personal, something bigger. Before Elon could respond, the guard spoke again, his voice softer but more intense. "I've seen the way you people act. You don't know what it's like for us. The people who don't have the same privilege. Maybe it's time someone like you learned what it feels like to be stopped." The words stung, even though they were barely above a whisper. But Elon's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. The guard's reaction wasn't just about authority. It was about something else, something far more personal. And for a brief moment, Elon's heart sank. He realized that in the man's eyes, he wasn't just blocking a billionaire. He was blocking someone who represented the very things that made this world unfair. The crowd around them grew quieter, sensing the tension. Elon stood still, taking in the moment. He knew this wasn't a time to retaliate, but to understand. There was more to this guard than met the eye. "Why don't we talk about this for a minute?" Elon said, his voice softer now, almost as if he were trying to reach the man beyond his hardened exterior. For a moment, the guard stood there, unmoving. Then, he shifted, as if his mind was caught between the tension of his duties and his own feelings. It's just that I've been fighting my whole life. And then I see someone like you, with all your money, all your fame. And it feels like you don't even know what it's like to struggle. It's like we're invisible." The words hung in the air. Elon felt a knot form in his stomach. He hadn't expected this. The guard wasn't just a figure of authority. He was a man with a life shaped by pain and struggles he hadn't seen. "I can't imagine what it's been like for you," Elon said slowly, his voice steady. "But I'm not the enemy. I'm just trying to make the world better, like you are." The guard's eyes softened, just slightly. But then, a woman's voice interrupted them. A voice that sounded distant, but somehow full of warmth. "It's not just about what you think, son." Both men turned, startled by the presence of an elderly woman standing just behind the guard. Her frail hands gripped her walker tightly, but her posture was straight, and her gaze unwavering. She was small in stature, but carried a strength that was undeniable. The guard's face dropped slightly as he looked at her, a visible shift of guilt in his eyes. "Mom, I told you to stay in the car." The woman smiled gently, her eyes never leaving Elon. "He's not the enemy, son. It's the world that's the enemy, and you have the power to change it, but you have to see it for what it is." Elon glanced at the woman, feeling an overwhelming sense of urgency. There was something about her, something profound. She wasn't just talking about the fight between the guard and Elon. She was speaking about something much bigger, a system that crushed those who were already struggling, a world where people like the guard fought for their dignity in a system that didn't care about their existence. "I know this isn't easy," the woman continued. But we all have a role to play. Don't let the anger consume you. Use it to make something better. And just as quickly as she had appeared, the woman began to walk away, her steps slow but purposeful. The guard stood frozen, his eyes still on her retreating form. Elon felt a pang of sadness, but also something else, an understanding. It was as though this moment had been planned by fate, a reminder that sometimes people had to learn their lessons the hard way. The guard finally turned to Elon, his face a mixture of confusion and realization. I didn't know you saw it that way. Elon nodded, his voice low but sincere. Maybe now you do. He glanced toward the woman, who was slowly disappearing into the crowd. Maybe it's time we all start seeing things differently. And with that, Elon Musk walked past the guard and onto the jet. But the impact of that moment, that conversation, lingered in the air long after he was gone. Elon settled into the plush seat of the jet, his mind racing. The woman's words echoed in his head, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play here. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding or a routine delay. This moment felt like a challenge, a reminder that there were things in the world beyond wealth, beyond technology, that he still didn't fully grasp. As the plane took off and soared into the sky, Elon's thoughts drifted back to the guard. The confrontation had been tense, but it wasn't just about the two of them. It was about the divide between those who had everything and those who were fighting just to be seen. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he had taken for granted in his life. His success, his privileges, they were all things that allowed him to move through the world without truly understanding the struggles of others. He closed his eyes, trying to quiet his mind, but the questions kept coming. What could he do to bridge that gap? What could he do to make a real difference? He wasn't just a businessman or an inventor. He was someone with the power to change things. And yet, the weight of those responsibilities was heavy. The stewardess walked over with a glass of water, snapping him out of his reverie. "Mr. Musk, there's a message for you," she said, handing him a small tablet. Elon looked at the message, which was simple but intriguing. "Meet me in the conference room. We need to talk about something important." He raised an eyebrow. His security team didn't usually send messages like this, especially not when he was in the air. Curious and slightly uneasy, he stood up and made his way toward the back of the plane. When he entered the conference room, he wasn't expecting to see anyone. But there, sitting at the table, was the elderly woman from the airport. Her presence was calming, almost like a force of nature. She smiled as Elon stepped inside, her eyes twinkling with something that he couldn't quite place. "Hello, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice warm but serious. "I'm glad you came." Elon's heart skipped a beat. "How did you get on this plane?" She chuckled softly. "Don't worry about that. What matters is that I'm here now. And so are you." She paused, giving him a knowing look. "You don't have to do this alone, you know." Elon took a seat, the weight of the situation sinking in. "What are you talking about?" "You're here to change the world, Elon. You've got the power to do it. But the question is, are you ready to use that power for something bigger than yourself?" Elon leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I mean that there are people who need you," she said, her voice firm yet gentle. "People who are fighting battles every day, battles you don't even know about. And it's time for you to understand what that fight really looks like." Elon felt a lump form in his throat. This was no longer just a casual conversation. This woman was here for a reason, and he was starting to realize that reason was about to change everything. "You've been privileged, Mr. Musk," she continued. "And while you've done a lot of good in this world, there's so much more that needs to be done. And it won't be done by just building rockets or electric cars. It'll be done by understanding the pain of others and using your influence to heal it." Elon's mind was spinning. He had always prided himself on being someone who thought outside the box, who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But this was a different kind of challenge, one that went far beyond innovation. This was about empathy, about truly seeing the world through the eyes of those who had been left behind. The woman stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the clouds below. "There's a little girl," she said, her voice softer now. "She's sick, and she's been dreaming of one thing: meeting you. She's heard about your work, and she believes you can fix things for her. You have the power to make her dream come true. Elon's chest tightened. What's her story? The woman turned, her face serious. Her name is Emily, and she's been fighting for her life for years. The doctors can't help her anymore, but she believes. She believes that if you hear her story, if you're the one to fulfill her last wish, maybe, just maybe, she'll have a chance. Elon felt a surge of emotion rush through him. This wasn't just a typical story. This was real. A little girl fighting for her life, holding on to the hope that he, Elon Musk, could somehow make a difference. I need to meet her, Elon said, the determination clear in his voice. Where is she? The woman smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. She's at a hospital in a small town in Nevada. But Elon, you have to understand something. This isn't just about fulfilling a wish. It's about understanding the power of your actions. It's about showing the world that change can come from unexpected places, from people who are willing to put their privilege aside for a moment and do something that matters. Elon stood up, his heart heavy with the weight of the responsibility now placed on his shoulders. He had never been one to shy away from a challenge, but this was different. This wasn't about technology or business. This was about humanity. I'll do whatever it takes, Elon said, his voice firm. I'll meet her, and I'll make sure her wish comes true. The woman nodded, her expression one of quiet approval. Good. Because the world needs to see what happens when someone like you finally understands what it means to care. And just like that, Elon Musk's world shifted. The path he had been on, the road that had once seemed so clear, now seemed uncertain. But one thing was for sure. He was ready to face this new challenge. And he was going to change the world, one person at a time. The flight continued, but Elon's mind was elsewhere. The weight of what he had just promised hung over him. A part of him wondered if he was doing the right thing. Could meeting one little girl really make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Could it change how the world saw him? But deep down, he knew this wasn't about changing perceptions or adding another achievement to his long list of successes. This was about something far greater, understanding the world in a way he never had before. As the plane neared its destination, Elon felt a strange sense of urgency. He wasn't just flying to meet Emily. He was flying to meet a side of the world he had overlooked for far too long. He had built his empire on innovation, on pushing the limits of what was possible. But now, in this moment, he realized that the real challenge was finding ways to push past the limits of his own understanding. The woman had told him that this wasn't just about fulfilling a wish. It was about something bigger. And as the jet began its descent, Elon's resolve grew stronger. He wasn't sure what he was about to walk into, but he was ready to face it. When they landed in Nevada, Elon was greeted by a team of medical professionals who escorted him to a small, nondescript building. The hospital was nothing like the sleek, state-of-the-art facilities he was used to seeing. The walls were worn, the hallways narrow. It was clear that resources here were limited, but that didn't diminish the urgency of the situation. Emily's room was on the second floor. As he walked down the sterile, quiet hall, Elon's heart began to race. What was he going to say to this little girl? What could he possibly offer her that would make any difference in her fight for survival? He finally reached her room. The door creaked open, and inside, he saw a young girl lying on the bed, her small body pale and fragile. She was hooked up to various machines, her breathing shallow. Her eyes were closed, but when she heard the door open, she opened them slowly and fixed her gaze on him. "Mr. Musk," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elon's heart clenched at the sound of her voice. She had heard of him. She had known about his work. And now, here she was, clinging to the hope that somehow he could save her. "Hello, Emily," he said softly, walking over to her bedside. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her, not sure what to say next. She gave him a faint smile. "I knew you'd come." Elon swallowed hard. "I'm here, and I'll do everything I can to help you." Emily's eyes twinkled, a small spark of hope flickering behind the pain. "I knew you would. I've always believed you could fix things, Mr. Musk." Elon felt a lump in his throat. "I'm not sure I can fix everything, Emily, but I'll make sure you're not forgotten. Your wish will be heard. People will know your story." She nodded slowly, as if she understood that there was no magic solution, no miracle cure. But for Emily, just the fact that Elon Musk, someone she had admired for so long, was sitting beside her was enough to make her believe that anything was possible. Her hand weakly reached out and grasped his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Thank you for making my dream come true." Elon held her hand tightly, fighting back tears. He had promised her that her wish would come true, but the weight of the promise had never felt so heavy. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. This moment, this girl, was going to change him forever. As he sat by Emily's side, time seemed to stand still. The world outside the hospital, with all its noise and chaos, felt distant. Here, in this room, the only thing that mattered was this fragile, brave little girl who had placed her faith in him. And as he looked at her, a new understanding began to take shape. It wasn't just about creating technology or innovating the future. It was about using his resources, his influence, to make a real, tangible difference in the lives of people who needed it most. The door to the room creaked open again, and a nurse stepped in. She gave Elon a polite nod but quickly turned to Emily. "I'm afraid, Mr. Musk, the doctors say Emily doesn't have much time left," the nurse said softly. Elon's stomach twisted. He had known this was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud felt like a punch to the gut. He looked at Emily, her smile still there, though it was growing weaker. "I don't need a cure, Mr. Musk," Emily said quietly, her voice barely audible now. "I just needed to see you. You've given me something I didn't have before. Hope." Elon squeezed her hand, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I'll never forget you, Emily. I promise." Her eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment, the room was silent, save for the soft hum of the machines that monitored her fading heartbeat. Elon sat there, frozen in place. He couldn't leave, not now. The girl who had put her faith in him was slipping away, but in that fleeting moment, she had given him something priceless: perspective. As he sat there, he realized that this was the kind of change the world needed. It wasn't just about the big things. It was about the little moments, the ones that didn't make headlines but meant the world to someone. He had the power to make those moments count. And as the world outside continued to spin, Elon Musk made a vow that day to use everything he had, not just to push the boundaries of technology, but to heal, to help, and to change the world in a way that truly mattered. The minutes passed in a blur. Time seemed to stretch, each tick of the clock echoing louder than the last, as if the world outside the hospital room had ceased to exist. Elon remained by Emily's side, his thoughts tangled in a web of uncertainty and sorrow. What could he possibly say to someone whose time was running out? How could he offer comfort when there was so little to give? Suddenly, Emily's voice broke through the silence again. Her eyes flickered open for a brief moment, weak but still full of that unshakable resolve. "Elon," she whispered. He leaned closer, trying to catch every fragile word. "Yes, Emily? I'm here." Her breath was shallow, but she smiled weakly. "You said you would make my dream come true. You have. You've already done so much for me. Thank you." Elon swallowed the lump in his throat, but this time, he couldn't hold back the tears. He had promised her he'd make her wish come true. But even though he had shown up, even though he had spent time with her, the truth was that nothing could truly erase the pain. Nothing could undo the sadness that lingered in the air. "Emily, Elon struggled to find the right words. "I don't know if I can fix this, but I'll make sure you're never forgotten. People will know your story, and they'll remember you." She nodded, a gentle sigh escaping her lips. "You've already given me the best gift, hope. That's all I ever wanted. I don't need anything else." Elon looked at her, his heart heavy. Emily's words haunted him, not because of their sadness, but because of the profound weight they carried. She didn't ask for fame, or recognition, or even miracles. All she wanted was for someone to see her, to acknowledge her struggle. And Elon realized, in that moment, that this wasn't just about Emily. It wasn't just about the promise he made to one girl in a hospital bed. It was about a world that often overlooked the silent struggles of those who needed help the most. It was about acknowledging the humanity of every individual, regardless of their circumstances. Emily's grip on his hand tightened slightly. Please, promise me. Promise me you'll make the world a better place. Don't just fix rockets. Fix people's lives. Elon felt the weight of her words sink deep into his chest. He didn't just want to change the world in grand, sweeping ways. He wanted to change it in the small, meaningful moments that mattered. And as Emily's eyes fluttered closed one last time, he realized that this was the true meaning of success. I promise, he whispered, his voice barely a breath. Just then, a faint beeping noise sounded from the machines connected to Emily. Her hand slipped from his grasp, and the air in the room seemed to change. A coldness swept in, and Elon knew, even before the nurse rushed to her side, that it was too late. The nurse, her face pale, confirmed the inevitable. I'm so sorry, Mr. Musk. She's gone. The words hit Elon like a physical blow, and for a moment, he couldn't move. He just sat there, his gaze locked on Emily's small, still figure. He had been so sure that he could make a difference, so sure that somehow he could save her. But in the end, it was clear that some battles were beyond anyone's control. But in that room, surrounded by the silence of loss, Elon understood something fundamental. Emily had shown him a kind of grace that he had never fully grasped before. It wasn't about making things perfect or achieving the impossible. It was about showing up, about being present for someone in their darkest moment. And that, perhaps, was the greatest thing he could do with his life. As he stood up from the chair, he took one last look at Emily. Thank you, he whispered, the words barely audible in the empty room. Thank you for changing me. Elon Musk left the hospital that day with a heavy heart, but something had shifted inside of him. The tech mogul known for his ambitious plans for space, for colonizing Mars, for revolutionizing technology, now saw the world in a different light. He saw the beauty in the quiet moments, in the small acts of kindness, in the lives that were often ignored by the world. It was no longer enough for him to be just a visionary. He had to be a person who could connect, who could give something back to the world, not just through technology, but through the way he treated people, the way he understood their struggles. As the sun set over the Nevada horizon, Elon made a vow. He would carry Emily's spirit with him, not just in his mind, but in his heart. He would push forward, not just for the future of humanity, but for the future of those who had been forgotten, those who had never had a chance to dream big. And he would make sure the world knew her name. The days following Emily's passing were a blur. Elon threw himself into his work, but every time he found himself at the helm of one of his many projects, he couldn't escape the feeling of emptiness that had taken root inside him. He had fulfilled Emily's last wish, but it wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to bring her back, to undo the profound sadness of the loss. One night, as he sat in his office, the weight of his thoughts pressing heavily on his chest, Elon received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was calm, yet urgent. Elon, you need to hear this, the voice said. It's about Emily. He sat up, his heart racing. What is it? What's going on? The person on the other end explained in a quiet, almost secretive tone. Emily had kept a journal, something she had written in during the last few months of her life. It was a collection of her thoughts, her fears, and her wishes. At first, it seemed like a simple piece of writing, until they discovered that Emily had predicted something that Elon couldn't have imagined. The journal spoke of something bigger than just her wish for recognition. It revealed a plan, an idea she had for the world, a vision that Elon hadn't fully understood until now. Emily had written about how she believed that people like her, people who were overlooked by society, deserved more. She wanted to see a world where the struggling and the vulnerable weren't forgotten, a world where their voices were heard. The journal went on to mention a potential project, something that Elon could do, something that would leave a lasting impact. It wasn't about building another spacecraft or launching a new technology. It was about creating a network of support for those who were suffering silently, a network that could bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Elon felt his breath catch as the realization hit him. This wasn't just Emily's wish. It was a call to action, a final message to him. Her vision wasn't just about hope. It was about creating real change. He hung up the phone and sat back in his chair, staring out the window. The world he had built, the empire of innovation, had been all about achieving the impossible. But now, for the first time, Elon understood that sometimes the impossible wasn't about reaching for the stars. It was about reaching for the people who needed help the most. The next day, Elon reached out to a team of trusted colleagues, assembling them to discuss what he had learned. They brainstormed, formulated plans, and came up with a strategy to create a new initiative, one that would honor Emily's vision and carry forward her message of compassion. But as the plans began to take shape, Elon encountered resistance. Not from his team, but from a different group of people. A group of powerful figures who didn't share his vision. They saw Emily's message as a distraction, as something that threatened their control over the world. They believed that a system designed to prioritize the needs of the few was the way forward, and they weren't about to let Elon, or anyone else, disrupt that. Elon soon found himself in a battle, not just against corporations and governments, but against a mentality that had existed for generations. The struggle was no longer just about changing the world with technology. It was about changing the very values that define society. At every turn, there was a challenge. But the more resistance Elon faced, the more determined he became. Emily had given him something far more valuable than a list of goals. She had given him a purpose. And with that purpose burning inside him, Elon was ready to do whatever it took to ensure that the world would remember her name, and that her vision would live on, no matter the cost. But he wasn't alone in this fight. People began to rally behind his cause. People who had been inspired by Emily's story, by the idea that every person mattered, no matter their background or their struggles. And as the movement grew, so did the opposition. The clash between those who wanted to maintain the status quo and those who were fighting for a world of equality and compassion became inevitable. As Elon prepared for the next step in his journey, he couldn't help but think of Emily one last time. Her legacy was far more than just a wish. It was a revolution in the making. The world would soon know her name, and they would understand the depth of her vision. And with every challenge Elon faced, he could hear her words echoing in his mind. Don't just fix rockets. Fix people's lives. And that's exactly what he was determined to do. The movement that Elon had started, inspired by Emily's final wish, quickly gained momentum. People from all walks of life came together, united by a single belief, that everyone, no matter their circumstances, deserved a chance. From the struggling single mothers to the elderly, the homeless to the forgotten, Elon's initiative became a beacon of hope. But as with every revolution, there were those who sought to crush it. Powerful figures within governments and corporations began to take notice, sensing the growing shift in power. They saw the potential of the movement to disrupt their long-held control, and they weren't about to let it go down without a fight. Elon knew what was coming. He had been through countless battles in the world of technology, but this was different. This wasn't about innovation or business. It was about something far more profound, the fight for humanity itself. He was no longer just a businessman or an inventor. He had become a symbol of resistance, a man determined to honor the memory of a woman who had believed in a better world. One evening, as he sat in his office, a knock came at the door. He turned to find his trusted assistant standing there, holding a letter. Elon took the envelope, his heart sinking as he recognized the seal. It was from one of the most powerful political figures in the country, someone who had been working behind the scenes to stop the movement. As he opened the letter and read the contents, his blood ran cold. The message was clear: shut down the initiative, or face consequences that could ruin everything he had worked for. The threat was more than just political. It was personal. Elon realized that those in power weren't just trying to stop a movement, they were trying to destroy him. And they were willing to go to any lengths to do so. But he couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything Emily had shown him. The memory of her smile, her unwavering belief in a better world, drove him forward. He couldn't let her legacy die, not after she had given him the strength to fight. The following weeks were filled with intense meetings, secret negotiations, and unexpected alliances. Elon worked tirelessly, building support from grassroots organizations, rallying people from every corner of society. He knew the fight would be long, and the obstacles would only grow, but he was ready. Then, in a twist of fate, the unthinkable happened. One of the most powerful figures who had once opposed the movement reached out to Elon. It wasn't a friendly gesture. No, it was a warning. They told him to stop pushing forward, to give up on the initiative. They had the power to destroy everything Elon had built, and they weren't afraid to use it. Elon's heart raced, but in that moment, something clicked. He realized that the power they had over him, over anyone, was nothing compared to the power of a united people. The only way they could be stopped was if they allowed fear to control them. And Elon wasn't afraid. Not anymore. So, he made a decision that would change everything. Rather than retreating or compromising, he took the battle to the people. He held a public address, one that would be broadcast around the world, where he boldly stated his commitment to Emily's vision. He wasn't just fighting for a cause anymore. He was fighting for the soul of humanity itself. The world watched in silence as Elon spoke. His voice, steady and unwavering, echoed through every home, every screen. It was a declaration not just of his intent, but of the collective power of those who believed in a better world. And in that moment, the tide began to turn. People stood with him, and the movement gained more support than ever before. The resistance he had once feared grew weaker, their attempts to stop him growing more desperate and ineffective. As the years passed, the initiative became more than just a project. It became a movement that reshaped society, one life at a time. Elon knew that the road had been difficult, filled with struggles and sacrifices, but in the end, it was worth it. He had fulfilled Emily's last wish, but it was far more than just honoring her memory. It was about building a world where no one was forgotten. A world where people, no matter their background, could rise above their circumstances and live with dignity. And as Elon looked out over the world he had helped create, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Emily's vision had come to life, and in doing so, she had given him the greatest gift of all, the understanding that the future wasn't just about technology or space. It was about humanity and the power of love and compassion to change the world.